Hello to all viewers of this presentation. Today we will deal with the problem with existential epistemology. We will see each point of the problem, and then we will compare briefly with scholastic epistemology, God willing. Let us begin by saying that all philosophers pretty much are existentialist in the sense that they believe in existence and incorporate this aspect in their philosophy. For that reason, we can say scholastics are existentialists in this sense, and pretty much all other philosophers. But we'll be talking about especially about modern existentialism. Now, the father of modern existentialism is Soren Kierkegaard. He was a Danish philosopher, and he is really the one who's going to mark this modern existentialist attitude. This is going to be our focus. But even here, I mean, we have to admit that each existentialist differ from the other. But nevertheless, there do exist certain basic epistemological tendencies, and let's analyze them. Yes. First of all, we have a special emphasis on man. Man very often has been studied as a thing among the entirety of things. Man has been subject in, let's say, objective quote unquote sciences. He has been seen in his purely dyadic dimension, totally depersonalized. He has been objectified. And existentialists, what they want to do, they want to go back to the individual. They want to go back to the concrete person, the value of the person, not just simply this objectified, over conceptualized man. This is a very valid and noble concern, of course. Now let's get into the problems, properly speaking. At the same time, so far as knowledge is concerned, there are many dangers which are deserving of consideration in the existentialist mentality, and they must be honestly and seriously considered. From the point of view of knowledge itself, there is great danger that the notion of subjectivity may lead to an outright subjectivism and to relativism. If each person is so unique in every way, if, as Sartre insists, he makes his own values, then he makes his own truth. Of course, this is a radical notion of existentialism, but it does apply in a sense to all. What he decides on for himself and what he freely chooses is good for him without respect to others. So too, what he decides has truth value and must have that value for him. In this way, we have come full circle, if it is taken literally, and we have in contemporary clothing an old exaggeration which can be associated with the idealism against which these men so violently reacted. So it's funny, going against idealism, they fall into the very idealism. They are counteracting. This becomes all the more clear in the philosophy of Sartre, as we mentioned. Now, here's a grave problem, no, in my opinion, with existential epistemology. We can see that there is a definitive attitude towards human knowledge and its power implied in their rejection of systems or any attempt at a system. This is an attitude that characterizes all existentialists. Remember, Kierkegaard comes after Hegel and responds to Hegel. Hegel's philosophy is very systematized, very abstract. No, the individual man is lost. That's what Kierkegaard feels. So his philosophy is a response, and pretty much all existentialism is a response to it. This is basically a dissatisfaction with the claim that something can be known of human nature in itself and in its fundamental relations. Its implication is that what we can know is the individual person only, and what can be said must be limited to the singular, the subjective, the immediately personal. These elements are emphasized in existentialism. Even those like Marcel, who is the book we're using in the course, the author is Gallagher, and he's a firm follower of Marcel. Even those like Marcel, who praise the work done by the natural sciences, and who seem to imply that on some level there is a validity to be conceded to them, seem to say that the same can in no wise be said of man's nature or of knowledge of it. Now, where's the problem here? It is true, of course, that each human person's unique. They're irrepeatable, they're irreplaceable. However, there is more to the picture than that. Each of us is a man, endowed with a human nature, of course. And each human nature is fundamentally the same in all of us. As we can know something about other natures, so we can know truths about human nature, truths which will hold for men wherever and whenever they are found. As can be seen, the negation just now ascribed to existentialism and the affirmation of knowledge of human nature we are here insisting on has an intimate relation to the power of the human mind to abstract and to enunciate universal truths for various natures. The power we have already vindicated for the human mind, the negation of it is an exaggeration. Recognition of the following truths, which would bring about a balanced attitude, is needed here. We need to recognize both of them. First, much of my knowledge of self is so intimate and personal that it is not conceptualizable, and yet it is true knowledge. Of course, that is true. But also, on the other hand, we must affirm that through conceptualization, I can and do know much about my human nature and the nature of all men. Another aspect, important, a problem with existential epistemology is its nominalistic mentality here. Now, this is manifested no through its impatience with systematization. It is pretty much allergic to all systems. No, as we said, in a response to Hegel's abstract and systematized philosophy. It would say that each one is so unique that general statements are only so many words which do not touch the reality of the individual person. Every type of universalization is a flatus vocis, as William of Ockham has said. We must in that case be content with individual bits of knowledge about my individual self, with no possibility of generalizing. Now, of course, it must be admitted that I cannot be anything except my individual self. However, I can know more than that. This anti system and anti general tendency and its consequent nominalistic implications seems to be true of every existentialist. So now we are generalizing, going against this tendency and saying that we are applying this to all existentialists. Now here you will see an image of William of Ockham, who's the founder of nominalism, with his image on the left, and on the right is a picture of him with his wielding his razor. He basically taught he wanted to separate all what he thought was futile in philosophy, and he basically said that um, the concise and shortest explanation of things. Now here we see in existentialism the primacy of choice. As Sartre would say, that man is essentially what he chooses. There is such an emphasis on the role of will and of freedom, even to the belittling of intellectual knowledge itself, that there is also a tone of voluntarism detectable. That is to say, the role of the will seems to be divorced entirely from knowledge and to be even substituted for knowledge. This, of course, is an irrational tendency here that we see. What I know is unimportant, and what I freely choose is what is true and valuable and good. As we see, this is what we mentioned before, that I become, in a certain sense, creator of my values, of my. Now, what has been said here can easily be supplemented by considerations from the points of view of ethics and theology. But our concern has been with the implications for theory of knowledge, epistemology. In fact, there exists existential ethics, which essentially are situational ethics, which is condemned by the church. It was condemned by Pius XII. If what has been said seems a bit harsh or even exaggerated, which it may be, we might reflect on the meaning of a remark made by a close friend of Gabriel Marcel, an existentialist that we mentioned before, who was a devout Catholic, by the way. He was a priest. His name is, I don't want to mispronounce his name, Trois Fontaines. He says that it would be just as much a pity to neglect rational structure and objective solidity as to neglect subjective analysis and the existential atmosphere. Of the two functions of language, that of suggesting and that of making precise, which culminate in pure poetry or mathematics, existentialism is inclined to confine itself to evocation. Scholasticism excels in definition. The two functions are indispensable to the life of the spirit. What do you get when you separate flesh from bone? A skeleton and a formless mass. Two dead things. This is a comparison which should be pondered as much by those who ridicule objectivity as by those who distrust subjectivity. So, in this sense, what the priest wants to do is harmonize, in a sense, scholasticism and existentialism. As flesh and a bone, as they need each other. Yeah, a very interesting quote here. In a sense, it can be said that what is here implied is that no one philosophy can ever claim to have exhausted the real, or to have provided all the definitive answers to all questions. Not even, I mean, there is no philosophy that is infallible, of course. The truth is always being discovered, and we should welcome it no matter what source happens to present it, or to present even one aspect of it. Hence, this priest says that in scholasticism we are provided with a basic core of truths, that we are led to a gradual knowledge of natures and of relationships, that through it we can come to know basic structures and constitutive principles, and much more of everlasting value. So, scholasticism, if we're going to do existentialism, we have to have the basic scholastic philosophical beliefs as its basis. However, there is a tone of cold-blooded objectivity to it all, he admits. There is there is a scientific and rational analysis and proof. There is an outline which, while valid, can stand much continual filing in. And that is one of the things which existentialism can do with its insights and its probing descriptions and analyses of human experience and meaning. So I guess here the bones would be would be scholasticism, and existentialism would be the flesh giving life to the bones. The bones are the basis, the basic truths. However, those analyses must be done in the light of those basic truths, as I mentioned. Truth cannot contradict truth. Of course, if there's a truth in existentialism, it cannot contradict a truth in scholasticism. That's contradictory, even though it comes from many sides. Scholasticism establishes the fact of freedom. Existentialism can show what freedom means in concrete situations. Scholasticism can show the intrinsic principles of matter and form in things, and of the composite nature of man, including his spiritual soul. Existentialism can describe what this means in particular situations, or mediate on it means to be incarnate, or to be in touch with things by sensation or intellection. So we see here existentialism providing a subjective complement, if you will, to scholasticism. There can be a complementarity in the treatment, and when there's opposition, the source of error or exaggeration must be discovered. Well, thank you very much for listening. We have reached the end, and we have seen some basic problems in existential epistemology, but also that if it does have, we have concluded that if it does have the basis of scholasticism and its core beliefs, then it can build upon that. It can provide it with a subjective complement. Scholasticism should always be the basis. At least moderate realism, I refer to moderate realism, should be the basis of all ulterior philosophical trends. Thank you very much, and God bless.